Thanks, guys. Good morning. I'm really so excited and honored to speak to you today. This is my fourth semester here, so second year, and it's just been an extremely meaningful 2 years. I've loved being in community with all of you. As AJ said, I grew up in Canada, and thank you, thanks. And I spent most of July every year camping with my family all over North America. So I'm the oldest of 5 kids, so if you can imagine, all 7 of us in my family piled into my parents' big gray Astro van, and for over 3 weeks slept in an 8-man tent together. So that was my summer. Those were my summers. It was great. So we would cook our meals over the fire or over a Coleman stovetop, and we would spend our evenings under the stars. And it was in those camping trips over the summers of my childhood that I fell in love with the night sky. The Lord has graciously let me make a career by studying it at NASA, and now by sharing it with you all here at Wheaton. I feel deeply connected to my Creator when studying creation, and that's what I'm going to speak on today. What studying the universe does to me spiritually and how it's affected my relationship with God. But before I do that, I want to give you a sense of just how vast the universe is. And I'm going to do that by looking at a few points in history when we realized the universe was so much larger and that there was so much more out there than we previously thought. And like AJ said, I have some pictures because you can't give an astronomy presentation without incredible pictures. And I just want to give you all a chance this morning to just experience the glory of God through creation. The history of astronomy is fascinating. It's one of the earliest sciences, with writings on the night sky dating back to 2600 BC. We're going to start today with the Greek philosophers, Aristotle, Plato, Ptolemy. They actually wrote a ton on astronomy, and they developed a cosmology, a way of viewing the heavens. They made several comments on how large they thought the universe was, usually with respect to the size of the Earth. And they had pretty accurate estimates of the size of the Earth at this point, so that wasn't a bad comparison. So we have Aristotle saying that the Earth, that relative to the heavens, the Earth is of no great size. Ptolemy wrote that the Earth has the ratio of a point to the heavens. These quotes were assuming that the stars were on a fixed sphere, since they do not change in speed relative to each other. But those early astronomers thought that fixed sphere was quite far away. So they had a sense for the enormity of the universe, but no quantitative information. I have a diagram here of Aristotle's view of the heavens. So they have Earth as the center of everything, and they have these spheres around it. There are 5 planets, or wanderers. That's actually the Greek word for planet is wanderer, because they move at a different speed than the stars across the night sky. They had the sun, the moon, and you can see about 2/3 up from the center of that circle is the sphere of fixed stars. And then beyond it was the unmoved mover, or the prime mover. That was Aristotle's view of God. This was their universe. But along with these objects, there was and there is this creamy, lighter band that spread across the night sky. If you've ever been to a dark site, if you've ever gotten away from light pollution, you'll see this light band. If we fast forward to the 1500s, we have astronomers like Thomas Digges starting to suggest that since there are some stars that are more dim than others, that perhaps they're actually the same brightness, but just at different distances. And if that's the case, then maybe there are actually more stars that are much further away than we can see with our naked eye. And maybe that creamy band across the night sky was actually a whole lot more stars, just too far for us to individually see. In 1608, a Dutch lens maker invented the first telescope. Galileo, a year after, heard of this, and he further developed the telescope, and by 1610 had discovered Saturn's rings, which he actually called Saturn's ears. Jupiter's 4 largest moons, sunspots, so those little dark blemishes on the surface of the sun. And he discovered that that creamy band was indeed countless other stars. And just for some context here, this is a good 200 years before running water in homes in Europe or plumbing. And we had already discovered Jupiter's largest moons and Saturn's rings. So that's pretty incredible in and of itself. So Galileo sees all these new stars, and he suggests that perhaps the number of new stars outnumbers the ones previously known 10 to 1. So instead of thousands of stars, the number jumped up to tens of thousands, or maybe even hundreds of thousands. We actually now know that we have in our own galaxy between 100 and 400 billion stars. And the distance between those stars is nearly incomprehensible. So, our closest star is 4.3 light years away, which probably doesn't mean much. So it's 25 million miles, which probably still doesn't mean a whole lot. So we've been able to go 4,000 miles per hour with the fastest jet here on Earth. And we've actually been able to go 8 times that speed with a spacecraft, 36,000 miles per hour. If you were on the fastest spacecraft going to the nearest star, it would still take you 79,000 years to get there. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. So the telescope becomes more and more developed, it improves, and then we begin seeing these clouds of gas and dust in the night sky. I have a few pictures of these, and these next three pictures are actually taken with our telescope here at Wheaton College. So this is the Orion Nebula. This is taken by senior Nathan Taylor. This is the Dumbbell Nebula. I took this image last summer. And then this is the Eagle Nebula, taken by AJ. Of course, these are images taken in the 21st century with 21st century technology. But this one was actually taken in 1900 at Yerkes Observatory, which is not far from us. We, with our modern eyes, when we look at this, we may quickly assume that it's another galaxy, but at the time, it was considered a mass of glowing gas. And at the time, it actually became a debate in the 1910s whether this was a nearby cloud of gas or whether there was another system of stars out there like the one in which we're living. Edwin Hubble, who's probably the most famous astronomer of the last 100 years, and he actually is from Wheaton. So he didn't go to Wheaton College, which is kind of disappointing, but there's this rumor that he first looked through a telescope at Wheaton College and became inspired to become an astronomer. There's zero verification of that, but I think it's a great story, so I'll choose to believe it. Anyway, so Hubble set himself to figure this out, whether this was a mass of glowing gas or actually another galaxy. He spent long nights imaging the Andromeda Nebula with the Hooker telescope in California. His effort paid off, and by 1923, the light from the nebula became better resolved into a multitude of little points. Additionally, he used some newly discovered techniques developed by a female astronomer, Henrietta Leavitt, to measure distances to this clump of stars, and he realized that the stars in this mass of gas were much further than anything we had measured distances to at that point. That this indeed was an island of stars outside of the hundreds of billions of stars around us. The rest of that decade was filled with discovering many more galaxies and characterizing these islands of stars. In 1990, we launched the Hubble Space Telescope. Well, I shouldn't say we, because I was a child, but Hubble, it was later I worked at NASA, but Hubble was launched in 1990. Hubble orbits 300 miles above our atmosphere, which means that it can see images much better than telescopes here on the surface of Earth. The atmosphere tends to distort images. So in 1995, Hubble had been in operation for 5 years already, and the scientists decided to point Hubble to a dark portion of the night sky, a really, really small dark portion, and just open the camera up and let in light for 140 hours, for 6 days, and just see what would come back. Before I show you this image, I have to explain just how small a portion of the night sky Hubble imaged. So we all kind of know how big a tennis ball is, right? So it's a little bit smaller than our hand. If you were to place a tennis ball 100 meters away, it would just be a little point. And that little point would be about how big of an area of the night sky Hubble imaged. So this was what came back. This contains over 3,000 galaxies. This tiny, tiny portion of the night sky that just had appeared dark to us before this. I've blown up a segment here for you to see this in more detail. This image is the equivalent of 1/24 millionth of our night sky. From 1995 to 1998, a series of these images were taken in different parts of the night sky. And it is through these images that we've been able to estimate that there are over 100 billion galaxies out there. So that Hillsong tune, 100 billion galaxies are born, that actually has it right. We have many ways of determining distances in the universe, and they've showed us that these galaxies we discover in Hubble are not evenly spread out, but they're actually found in clumps. And those clumps or clusters create superclusters. And those superclusters actually form into these strands or filaments of galaxies. The strand that we are in is called Laniakea. It's a Hawaiian word, and it has 100,000 galaxies in it. Here is a projection of what Laniakea may look like. So this is a projection. Obviously, we haven't gotten outside of Laniakea to see this. But I've zoomed in here to our part, the local group that contains our Milky Way, the Andromeda Galaxy, and a few others. If we zoom out from Laniakea, this next image is a projection of what the large-scale structure of our universe may look like. A whole web of galaxies. All of this can leave one feeling quite small. If we look at how expansive the universe is, our size can feel inconsequential. And it's easy to feel like our lives in the picture don't mean much. But when I look at these images, I have a different reaction. When I look at these images, I am comforted that the same God who created and governs this massive, massive universe cares for me, speaks to me, and ministers to me. That when I feel anxious and restless and heavy, the same God who created and governs all of these galaxies tells me in Joshua 21 that he will give me rest on every side, and that every one of his promises will come true. The same God tells me that my guilt is taken away and my sin atoned for, and that he is pleased with me. And despite being very, very small, he gives me a significant role to play in spreading his kingdom. I have to give a shout out to Izzy Dominguez before I go on, because my wording here is based on a conversation we had after an astronomy class last semester. I was sharing about the comfort that these Hubble deep field images give me, and he very poignantly said that there is a difference between being small and insignificant and small and significant. This so resonated with me. We are called to do significant work despite our small size. This conclusion that despite being small, we have a meaningful, significant, lasting role to play here is not the logical conclusion if you're a naturalist. If you're someone who believes the natural is all that there is and that the supernatural doesn't exist. This next and this last image I'll show was taken by the Voyager 1 spacecraft. Voyager 1 left the Earth in the 70s, and by 1990, it was at the edge of the solar system. The principal scientists had Voyager turn around and take one more image looking towards the center of the solar system, just off from the sun. This image is what returned. And that dot, it's very hard to see, so I put a black arrow there. That dot, caught in the center of a scattered ray of light, is the Earth. Carl Sagan, a Canadian astrophysicist and atheist, and one of the scientists that worked on Voyager at the time, made this comment. Sorry, just a second. Thanks. Look again at that dot. That's here. That's home. That's us. On it, everyone you love, everyone you know, everyone you've heard of. Every human being who ever was has lived out their lives. The aggregate of our joy and our suffering, thousands of confident religions. Every king and peasant, young couple in love, every mother and father, hopeful child, inventor and explorer. Every teacher of morals, every corrupt politician, every superstar, every supreme leader, every saint and sinner in the history of our species has lived there, on a mote of dust suspended in a sunbeam. Sagan goes on to say, because of the reflection of sunlight, the Earth seems to be sitting in a beam of light as if there were some special significance to this small world. But it's just an accident of geometry and optics. Our posturings, our imagined self-importance, the delusion that we have some privileged position in the universe is challenged by this point of pale light. Our planet is a lonely speck in the great enveloping cosmic dark. In our obscurity and all this vastness, there is no hint that help will come from elsewhere to save us from ourselves. Contrast Sagan's quote with, "But you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a special possession, that you may declare the praises of him who has called you out of darkness into his wonderful light. For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish, but have eternal life." Luke 12:7, we are told that we are so valuable that even the hairs on our head are numbered. And later in that chapter, we have our theme verse for this year, "Fear not, little flock, for it is the Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom." We are valued. Our lives have meaning, and help has come from elsewhere to save us. This is a wonderful apologetic to the Christian faith. We all want our lives to mean something. C.S. Lewis and N.T. Wright, and originally Augustine, argue that our longings show the existence of something. So our hunger means there is something like food. It doesn't mean that it will necessarily get that food. People go hungry, but it means it exists. Likewise, we want there to be meaning, and not just temporary meaning, but lasting meaning. And we desire this because there is such thing as lasting meaning. You desire to live a meaningful life because you have a significant role to play in spreading God's kingdom. Romans 12 is actually the perfect passage for this message. And I didn't choose it. I was actually told, speak on your vacation and Romans 12. So it was a relief to see how well it connected. It's the mark of a Christian community. The beginning part of Romans is how to live out our faith in the church. And the second section is how to live out our faith in the world. This passage details what significant work we are called to do. We are to love one another with brotherly affection, to outdo one another in showing honor, to serve the Lord, to stand up for what is good, to stand against that which is evil, to bless those who curse you, to live in harmony, to rejoice with those who rejoice and weep with those who weep. By doing these things, we are spreading the kingdom that will last for eternity. And this is the type of community that influences souls to know their Lord or develop deeper, more meaningful connections to their Lord. One of my favorite quotes is by C.S. Lewis in The Weight of Glory. It's a little bit of a heady quote, so I've written it out for you here. It is a serious thing to live in a society of possible gods and goddesses, to remember that the dullest, most uninteresting person you talk to may one day be a creature which, if you saw it now, you would be strongly tempted to worship, or else a horror and a corruption such as you now meet, if at all, only in a nightmare. All day long, we are, in some degree, helping each other to one or the other of these destinations. It is in light of these overwhelming possibilities, it is with the awe and the circumspection proper to them that we should conduct all of our dealings with one another. All friendships, all loves, all play, all politics. There are no ordinary people. You have never talked to a mere mortal. Nations, cultures, arts, civilizations, these are mortal, and their life is to ours as the life of a gnat. But it is immortals whom we joke with, work with, marry, snub, and exploit. Immortal horrors or everlasting splendors. By loving with a genuine love, by holding fast to what is good, by living in harmony, by rejoicing with those who rejoice and weeping with those who weep, we are influencing souls. And this is the most important work we can do, to influence souls into the kingdom, into relationship with this creator of those 100 billion galaxies. So I have shared what impacts me when I study the universe. Finally, I want to share about what has most impacted me about this community. I get asked about what I'm enjoying about Wheaton or what my favorite part of this community is. And while I love the faculty and staff, genuinely, I've made some great friendships here. And the speakers we bring in are thought-provoking and fascinating. My favorite part is the student body. And I realize that I'm kind of sucking up to you all by saying that. But I was given 20 minutes by the college to say whatever I wanted to you guys. I find it so inspirational how you embrace your calling. You as an individual, but also you corporately, are going to go out and do such significant work in spreading the kingdom. You are going to go out into the worlds of business and finance, of chemistry and physics, of music and politics. And you will be attempting to love with brotherly affection, to stand up for good, to stand against that which is evil, to rejoice with those who rejoice and weep with those who weep, to spread the kingdom of God. And by doing so, you will be doing meaningful, significant, lasting work. May the Lord bless you in that work. Thank you.